Okay, so I'm back for a Ravenswatch talent tier list, this time on Carmilla. Someone had let me know that I actually never made her video because I finished these before she was released. But here I am, I feel like I have enough experience with her to talk about her and all these talents. My parameters for these talents were, one, how good is the talent on its own? If you take it and you have nothing else supporting it, how much does that talent do for you? How good is it on its own? Second is, when that talent is supported by the other talents you would want to support it, how much better is it? Is it like dramatically better when it's supported? Or, is it kind of meh? And the third is kind of like that. It's in the build that you would want to use this talent. How soon do you want it to come? Is it the number like 1, 2, 3 talent that you want? Or is it okay if it's pushed down to like 7, 8, or 9. Can I get rid of this ad? I cannot. Unfortunate. Okay. And so yeah, that's how I'm going to be doing this tier list. The starting talents also have a little bit more competition with each other because you can only take one starting talent at a time. Okay, there, that ad is out of the way. Yeah, you can only have one starting talent at a time. You can't double up on them. So starting talents have a little bit more competition between each other. And you see Batmaster there. That's because I already recorded this video and the page quit out and I had to restore it. Batmaster is there. I think it is her best starting talent. I think it's kind of like the default starting talent. If you don't really have an idea or specific build that you're going for, I think you take Batmaster. The ability to move around the map quickly without consuming blood can save you so much time when it comes to the entirety of a run. You can also sneak things, like you can go through a camp and land on a vision tower and level up and potentially hit like level 3 from your yellow vision tower before fighting the camp or something like that. Say you only have like a minute left, you can potentially sneak another chest or something. Also, as you're going between camps and you see dream shard clusters, you'll have an easier time in setting yourself up in a position to where enemies can't see you, so you can break those for free and they don't get like the added defense to them. And then just in co-op, you can play as a scout and you can go scout like the entire map, pick up teleports for like wishing well, for grimoires, stuff like that, and just help your teams clear speeds or like movement speed overall. I think this is a really good talent, and yeah, it's kind of my baseline now for when I play Carmilla without an idea. And those ads are back, dude, this site. Okay, next starting talent is Life Essence. This one is pretty decent. You have a quest where you have to kill 30 enemies with the special's bite and you gain 1 vitality. That's 30 vitality at the end of it, which is pretty good. That's 3 healing fountains. It's not bad at all. And then repeating this will restore health. This in its build is a really good sustain. 20 health on a bite. The only thing about this heal is it is specifically to you. It's not a heal that is shared amongst other characters. But Carmilla's daytime trait does heal nearby players, and if you are building into your special, you will have your trait up very often and last for a long time. So this build kind of feeds into that with the special bite. I don't think it's nearly as important as something like this. The 30 vitality is nice for something like Ogre Blood. If you have 5 Ogre Blood, that's 15 damage, which isn't bad. But I don't think it's crazy necessary. It's not bad at all. It's just that Batmaster, in almost every run, I find more use out of this. I only take Life Essence when I'm doing the special build, and even then, it doesn't really need it. Like, it's just more sustain if you're doing that build, but it's not a necessity to it. Now, moving on, we have Blood Rage, another quest. This was one that I really wanted to like a lot more, and I don't think it's bad, but I just wish it synergized with something like Injection or had more synergy in the kit. Hitting an enemy with the power for at least 1 second while power is held, you'll gain more damage. And this is damage as like your flat damage number. And once you finish that quest, repeating this action causes your power to the explosion from it to deal more damage. That explosion is actually pretty good when you take multiple power charges. Originally, I thought that Carmilla wasn't a character that you'd take multiple power charges because you kind of build around this one big moment of this big power. But with Flesh Rip, which is a talent that gives you more critical hit chance while an enemy is bleeding with your power, and Sadism, where your critical hits against bleeding enemies deal more damage, you're actually kind of incentivized to have multiple powers, and if you're using Blood Rage to proc a power, let it sit there for like the 1 second to get this extra damage explosion and then release it, and then trigger another power and do this over and over. Playing it like that, it's really good AoE and arguably better late game than just holding your power down. I really value that. I think it's a really fun build. I really enjoy the build. I just wish they made this synergize with Injection. I wish they made the bite from Injection also trigger that like held down power or something. Okay, then moving on to Life Tap. Life Tap is very situational. I have grown to like this quite a bit but I don't think the builds with it are nearly as good as any of the other builds. They're just builds for flair in my mind. So in winged form, you could use your trait again to consume health equal to 20% of your max health and recover up to 30 blood points. This ability cannot be used when below health cost and has a 5-second cooldown. If this synergized with Gust or with Angel and Demon, and I understand why it doesn't synergize with Angel and Demon, but if it synergized with Gust, I would rate it higher. The ideal way in my mind how to play this is you do a boiling blood build where you're okay with sacrificing your health, using blood for your power or something, and keep on channeling your power even after you run out of blood points. And then as you go into the regeneration, if you have a bunch of mermaid tears and unicorn horn, you'll regenerate your health back regardless, so using life tap doesn't matter. The other use for life tap is with the impalement ultimate to have a bunch of ultimate cooldown and potentially the ultimate ring, and use a bunch of ultimates with max blood points with blood reserve or something like that. It's very niche, and I find it fun to play like this just because I've played these other Carmilla builds quite a bit, but I don't really think it's that good. C tier is rough. I think there are some people that will really like life tap, but I just don't think in general, like, I think C tier is pretty rough, but in general, I think most other builds with the other starting talents are just better. Like, the odds of you getting something that works better with this is just, now C tier might be kind of rough. I think it's mainly because life tap in my mind has a higher skill ceiling, but even what it provides at a higher skill ceiling, something like these at their skill ceilings just provide more for you. I think this talent provides the least amount of usefulness through the entirety of a run, especially because blood points normally aren't an issue by the end of your Carmilla runs. You normally have made up for it in one way or another. Now, moving on to Razor Claws. I look at this, there's not a lot for me to talk about this. It's an enabler to apply more bleed. There's certain things like Flesh Rip and Sadism that want enemies to be bleeding, and this helps you do it. In my mind, the areas where you would take this is if you don't have Dispersion, or if you don't have enough defense charges to continually make enemies bleed, then you can use Razor Claws as a way to help that. I really don't think there's much use of it outside of that. It does synergize with Onslaught and Cruel Strikes, but the synergy there is pretty negligible. Okay, going on to Puncture, and I now see that these are out of order based off how the game has them. So let me find Puncture. Puncture, every time you dash through an enemy, you earn 8 blood. I also find this to be not super helpful. Again, by the end of most Carmilla runs, I normally have special cooldown or special charges, and I'm not too worried about my blood stacking ability. Again, this is a thing that you would really only take around like 6, 7, 8, or 9 if you're still struggling with blood, but I think you should have already invested into blood generation before Puncture. This does let you avoid special charges and cooldown a little bit, but I really think that they're still better even if you are going for like a Baylor's Eye power build or something like that. Next up is Dispersion, and this is kind of that first example. There's not a lot to build around this. Dispersion can help other builds, but there's not a lot that builds into Dispersion. Dispersion is just something that's really, really good on its own. You take it, it is instantly a key component to your build and what you should be doing. After releasing your defense, you have this pretty big AoE around you that will start dealing bleed damage to all enemies around you. This can start stacking with your critical hits and your damage number. You can clear entire groups of enemies by using a defense, going in there and just running away, and they'll all just tick to death. This is an amazing talent, probably one of the best talents in her kit. Victimization. This gives you... Oh, wait. Okay, I was about to say something else. This just applies marked for enemies for 4 seconds. Marked enemies take more damage. This is pretty good in most builds. Marked is a good status effect. Only Carmilla and Scarlet have access to it, so in co-op, it's also nice because not a lot of characters are going to be applying this, so if you have marked, it is just more damage. I think it's A tier. I don't say it's S tier because it's single target focused, which it is helpful on bosses. It's nice for bosses. Again, I'm not really too worried about bosses for the most part in this game, but it is just nice extra damage if you get it. If I put these in order, this would probably look like this. I think Victimization is better than Blood Rage. I don't think this is bad at all. It's one of those things where take level 6, 7, 8, 9, just add a little bit more damage to what you're already doing in most builds. Okay, next up is Sadism. Sadism is one of those things where I really don't want it at level 2, 3, or 4 for the most part, maybe level 4, because critical hits deal 40% more damage on enemies afflicted with bleed. I need to have a way to be doing critical hits. Like, I want good crit chance, and normally I'm not getting that until level 4 or potentially level 5, 6, based off building up your Grimoires or Eternal Rose or Horn of Plenty or stuff like that. So this is a really good talent that I think slots itself into pretty much every single Carmilla build, but it slots itself level 6, 7, 8 a lot better than the early levels. It's kind of a slow playstyle if you get this level 2 or 3 because it's not doing that much for you. So I think it's really, really good. And I honestly think it has to be S tier because, again, I could recommend it in every single build of hers, but I think I recommend it on the later half of every single run. So it's just not as important as the other things that are going to help you immediately. Okay, next up is Boiling Blood. And I know there's a lot of Boiling Blood defenders out there where after consuming health for at least 1 second, feel an ability, gain regeneration. There's the cool synergy of this where you can stack 4 stacks of Unicorn Horn to get regeneration and get the extra 50 damage during regeneration. If you take some Mermaid Tears, this regeneration can stack more than the damage that you're going to do to yourself, that it heals you all the way to full. I think that's a lot of your magical objects forced into Mermaid Tears, into Unicorn Horn, that you can just put them somewhere else. You're building like so much of your build into this one talent, and while it is kind of cool, you're missing out on just taking King of Clubs. You know, you're just missing out on taking Golden Egg, stuff that's a lot more consistently good for you than stacking. And for the most part, you never need to stack 5 or like 4 or 5 Mermaid Tears in a build. This build kind of asks you to stack at least 3, but once a little bit more than that. I can't put it C tier because I can acknowledge that it's somewhat useful, and I honestly think it is better than, like, I don't think it's better than Razor Claws. I would prefer the application of bleed on Razor Claws in a certain build if I didn't find Dispersion over Boiling Blood, but there's a lot of Boiling Blood defenders. I've seen a lot in my comments. I've done the build where you do this. It's cool. I was like happy that it worked, but I wasn't blown away by what I could do with the build. I'm like, dang, I just invested so much into Boiling Blood that this build would have just been amazing if I went power damage, if I went Golden Egg or something else. So I respect it, but just maybe not as much as other people. All right, go for the throat. This is more critical hit damage. The further away you are from an enemy, up to 40%. This goes up to 70% at Legendary. If you have 4 Jacket Diamonds, that is 40% critical hit chance from your super effect, which puts you above 100. This talent can guarantee you 100% critical hit chance with that. Meaning from your Grimoires, you can take critical hit damage every single time. Any talent that can let you do that, for the most part, is an S tier. It's amazing. If you can guarantee crits and just focus crit damage, you're going to have a great run. I can promise you that. This lets you play the game in a way where I call it the connect the dots build. You literally just find an enemy, use your special, just connect the dots where are enemies, and go for the throat, stacked with damage, stacked with 4 Jack of Diamonds is just going to one-shot pretty much everything until you get to like chapter 3 Knights. Those might take a couple hits, but by the time you're, level 11 in chapter 3, you'll be one-shotting. It's a crazy build and one of my favorites of hers in the game. Okay, Furious Tempest. This is probably the most important part of the power build, potentially. I mean, Injection is also there, Wild Heart, but this adds damage. It's the main way to add damage with the power build, except for Flesh Rip, where after consuming blood to fuel power, gradually increase its damage up to 40% after 3 seconds of holding. This is, in my mind, how you play her power build for the most part, is finding a really good spot to set up her power and just hold it down. This buffs that. It buffs like the #1 thing that you want to be doing with Carmilla, level 1. This is like one of the best level 2 talents in my mind that you can get, because again, it just takes the playstyle that you're already doing and makes that happen quicker. I want to say this is S tier, probably bottom of S tier, because some of these other things like can really be built into a lot better. But I've seen what was the damage number? Someone was in a stream with me and they hit 12k or something on a single power tick. I know that's a unique case, but Furious Tempest is really, really good. One of her best talents that she has in my mind. Okay, going on, we have Gust. When you activate your trait, you push enemies back and deal damage to them. The best thing that this does is it staggers enemies. Like, it adds a lot of stagger. Carmilla really struggles against crabs. Your best way to stagger crabs is with your power, and you need a really good setup for that, and even then it takes a long time. This applies a lot of stagger. Again, I wish this stacked with life tap. I like Gust, but if you have a build that generates special and keeps your trait, or generates blood and keeps your trait going for a long time, you really don't get that much use out of this. You get the most use out of Gust if you use your trait and then you have no blood and it instantly cools down again, and then you use Gust again. So maybe in like a Boiling Blood build, Gust works a lot better, and then combine that with Angel and Demon and just like pop your trait and have it cool off pretty quickly. I think it's good. Again, if it combined with life tap, I think it would have been so much better. I think it's better than all of these And I still take it in a lot of other builds just to help her stagger, but I don't think it's like a core part of many builds that she has. All right, next is Aggressive Flock, the one that's been sitting at the front here taunting you guys this entire time. Aggressive Flock is good, kinda. During defense, Carmilla sends a bat every 0.5 seconds. You upgrade how quickly you send out bats that seek out nearby enemies, pierce through them, dealing 10 damage. This can target nearby enemies that aren't in camps and prolong your fights, which is probably the worst aspect of it. While you're in stealth form, it doesn't target enemies, so you don't really have to worry about that. I find it not super necessary if you're doing a defense build that focuses on multiple defense charges and defense cooldown and dispersion spam, and then just holding down a defense and circling around and being intangible. It's pretty good. Adds actually a decent amount of damage to that. I will say the builds that I have done that where I've really taken advantage of this, I've seen this really tick down enemies pretty quickly, especially when you have it fully upgraded and you just hold the defense down for a long time. I think it's good. I definitely think this is a good talent. Maybe a little bit better than Blood Rage. Okay, Blood Reserve. Increase maximum blood reserve by 20%. Now I'm going to click on this. At the end of their course ultimate... Wait, no, I'm going to click on this. You don't really get to read that all because of how it sits there, but... Consume all blood and launch a series of blood spikes erupting from the ground in front, dealing 450 damage per second to enemies in the area. Each blood point consumed increases the damage by 1%. This increases your blood reserve. Blood reserve is decent because of that. And then that's the best combo that it has, is using your ultimate. And using your ultimate in its bloodless form so that you have more blood. It also is just helpful in the power build a lot of times so that you don't fully use all your blood. I don't find blood reserve to be super necessary in most builds. It's really, really niche in the times that you do want it and how much it will help. I find it probably less necessary than Puncture, but you can make it pretty good when it synergizes with the ultimate. Now Onslaught, this is an interesting one. And this is one that I might need to play more with. After special, next attack makes Carmilla rush forward, dealing 800 attack damage to nearby enemies that it passes through. Maybe at some point I'll do a full attack Carmilla build where I really focus on this and Cruel Strikes without the Blood Whip ultimate and I see how it performs. I don't think this is good. It's good for repositioning, but a lot of times, and this is just me and the amount of times that I play with Onslaught, I forget that it's going to happen after my special, so I go to attack an enemy nearby and I dash into the middle of a group of enemies and get killed because of it. But the damage that it does, even though it says 800% and it sounds really appealing, it's really not that much damage. I'm currently going to put this in the bottom of C tier. I almost never take this. I do currently never take this. I need to take this and play with it and try to make it good before I ever raise this up, because I have had no success with this. This is one that we all want to work differently. In combat, standing still makes Carmilla seduce up to 2 non-boss enemies in front of her, applying weak and vulnerable for 6 seconds, has a 6-second cooldown. If this worked how we all wanted it to with power, and I think the upgrade goes up to 6 enemies, this would be a take in every single power build. That would be really, really good, because weaken would reduce the amount of damage done to you as you're holding your power, and you might be more incentivized to take a hit, and vulnerable on every enemy would make you kill them faster. To play around this right now is pretty awkward. The 2 seconds that you have to stand still is kind of weird. I currently never take this as well. I could see it being okay if you are taking it right now and you're like, hey, it's busted. I think you're in the minority. I'm sorry. Maybe it's more useful than these. Again, vulnerable and weaken is cool on an enemy, but I really hope they add something for this. I think we all hope they add something for this. Now, Cruel Strikes. This is good for... It's actually kind of decent, to be fair. If you are trying to force an attack build, Cruel Strikes is pretty good in the damage that it does. It does 100% more damage to enemies after a dash or defense, because it does the final combo finisher, which does more damage as well. And this goes up to 175%. With like an Eternal Rose dash build, this is kind of decent for an attack build. It's nothing compared to like a Double Strike or a Fiery Slash, but it is decent. But this is the catalyst. This is what you do to enable her Blood Whip ultimate. And also the other one, the Impalement ultimate, the other one like Heartbreak or whatever. That's not nearly as good. Never go for that. But it enables the Blood Whip and Mass Punishment. And I think because of that, like it on its own, if I'm ranking it without Mass Punishment in mind, I'm probably putting it here. But with Mass Punishment in mind, you know what? This will be the bottom of S tier. Like Mass Punishment on its own is up here because it's almost like guaranteed in my mind that you've forced yourself to reroll into this, and if you haven't, what are you doing? But like it's here because you know what, I can't do that. It's here. But because of mass punishment, understand that this is an S tier when you have that build going. And mass punishment, for anyone wondering, is this. I will have a different video talking about ultimates and all of these extra abilities. And this is Heartbreak for anyone that's wondering. They do the same thing, where Cruel Strike can enable both of these right away, but this one is just much better. Angel and Demon. Angel and Demon's one that's similar to Sadism. Wait, did I grab Flesh Rip when I meant to talk about... This is Flesh Rip. I talked about Sadism earlier. This is Flesh Rip. Apologies. That was probably driving some people crazy. This is Sadism. This is another one. I'm on Sadism right now. Angel and Demon is another one similar to Sadism that kind of just slots itself into almost every single build. When using trait in the day, it restores health for you. That's just good. You're playing Carmilla. You might be draining your own health. At nighttime, you give yourself strength. In the power build, this is insane. In the special build, this lets you get a lot of those kills that you might have just missed out on if you just didn't have enough damage. In the Blood Whip build, this is insane. In the defense build, this is insane. Carmilla with strength is really, really good. This is another bottom of S tier. It's one of those level 6, 7, 8, 9 talents that you take along with Sadism. Because it works in every build, that's why I have it up here. Again, it's not a level 2, 3, 4 talent that I necessarily want, maybe level 4, but it just works in every build. So by that nature, it has to be up here. Okay, moving on to Wild Heart. Power's orb move speed is increased by 100%, and the explosion gets 20% more range. This synergizes with injection, and it makes the range on that explosion bigger. This is really useful in the power build. The power orb moves very, very slowly. This is one of those things that you could live without. Like, you really could live without. You don't need it for the power build. It's just a convenience, and it's a really, really good convenience because a poorly placed power can slow down a camp clear so much where this movement speed could potentially recover it. It's not S tier because I don't think you need it, but I still would take it in every single power build that I would do. So I'll put it here. Yeah, and I think that's pretty fair. Now, Injection is one of these weird talents because the description of it leads me to believe that this would be one of my favorite talents in the game. I love talents that work like this, where your special can now affect your power, or power can affect special, or dash can affect power, stuff like that. Special implants blood into a bitten enemy that shortly triggers an explosion of power. This means all of your King of Clubs damages are now also scaling not just from your power, but from your special, because your special can do power. The other thing that's cool with this is Sadism. If the enemy is bleeding, your special can affect that enemy, and then the power explosion can. Flesh Rip, which is down here, which I should have already talked about, but haven't for some reason. Flesh Rip, if the enemy is bleeding and you bite them with your special, they're going to do more damage, and then your power has more crit chance if you have Flesh Rip on its explosion. I love stuff like this. Injection on its own is pretty bad. Like, it as a level 2 talent, when you do a power build, I would want Injection at level 2 or 3, but after having it multiple times, it's really not that helpful. It helps in like the small ghoul camps and stuff and like spiderlings, but Injection is pretty terrible damage for a long time. Like, it feels really, really bad until you finish King of Clubs, until you get Sadism, and until you get Flesh Rip. But because it completely enables this power build to be more mobile and completely fixes the issue that the power build has against Baba Yaga, where it's really hard to pull off these long powers in solo play against Baba Yaga. Yeah, this just fixes this. This has to be an S tier, and it has to be a pretty good one because of how much it fixes it. So I'm going to put it up here. And then last but not least is Flesh Rip, and this should have been earlier. I don't know why I waited on this. Very, very similar thing to Go for the Throat. There's just a little bit more of a thing to trigger there. Power has 40% more critical chance on enemies afflicted by bleed. This is why Dispersion is so good as well, because it applies bleed in such a wide area. You need your defense to apply bleed, and then or something like Razor Claws, which will apply bleed on your attack. As long as you have a way to apply bleed somewhat consistently, this is really good. Again, it helps your power build, it helps Injection, it helps Furious Tempest, it works with Sadism. Really, really good talent. I'm going to put it right here just because it's a little bit harder to proc than Go for the Throat. Alright, and there is my Carmilla talent tier list. I didn't do any of this before, I just did this off the top of my head, so there might be some things that I could be swayed one way or another. If you leave a comment about it on something that you're passionate about, go ahead and tell me if you agree with this list or not and your thoughts on it. And yeah, expect a ultimate tier list going over all the like 2 ultimates and the 4 ultimate upgrades, or whatever those 4 bottom talents are, because they are affected by the ultimates. I'll be working on that soon. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this one. Peace out.